Good morning all. I welcome you all for the annual lecture series 2021. On behalf of Mohammed Sadiq AJ Academy of Architecture, I welcome Professor Mohammed Harris, Dean and Advisor, Professor Mohammed Idris, Principal, Professor Satish Kumar T, HOD and Convener, Professor Samad, Design Chair, all architects, faculties and students who are present here. This program will be moderated by Architect Shilpa Das, Assistant Professor, MSAJA. With immense pleasure, on behalf of MSAJA, I welcome today's guest speaker, Architect Apurva. Architect Apurva finished her architecture course at School of Planning and Architecture, Bhopal in 2016 and ventured into her interest for landscape and architecture. Amidst all the drafting and sheets printing she did in her office, she came to a choice of quitting her job as a landscape designer and started to volunteer for an international permaculture convergence, staying and living on a farm for 7 months. She did permaculture design course with her mentor Narasimha Koppula in June 2017, further to continue the journey with Aranya Agricultural Alternatives as a mapping expert for farm designs. She also became a permaculture teaching with pioneer Rosemary Morrow and a designer with Sarah and Yunus from Aranya Permaculture Academy. With an experience of working on the land with the people since 2017, she did what she loved the most, explore the unseen in nature. She recently did her training of trainers about mindful facilitation for solar social empowerment with Gaia Educational Global Eco Village Network in Thailand. I shall now request Architect Apurva to take over the session from here to share your knowledge on permaculture design thinking and architecture. Yes, Apurva. Apurva, can you hear me? Apurva, you're not audible.
Hello. Hi, Shilpa.
Yes, now we can hear you. Hi, Apurva.
I'm so sorry for the inconvenience.
That's okay. All okay now?
Yeah, all good. Yeah. So are you able to see my screen?
Yes, we are.
Okay. So first of all, I would really like to thank all of you from the college department and all the students who have, come here to listen to my experiences and understand about permaculture design thinking in architecture. So let's begin.
Yes, sure.
Yeah. So what I would like all of you to do is, if you can, by the end of the presentation, note down points that you already had a little idea about. Then, what are the new things or what are the new body of knowledge that you learned from this presentation? And finally, if you could note down any kind of questions if you would like to ask or any doubts that you would like to clarify. So, in the presentation, I'm going to talk about permaculture, ethics, principles, concept, strategies, context, methods, elements, and practice. So, permaculture, if we try to define or introduce it in terms, it has a very strong sense of shared work towards evolving sustainable, ethical, and viable systems for the only planet we have. Its foundation lies on the powerful living systems and derives its inspirations from biological processes that govern and dominate on this planet, which affects all life forms and their survival, as we all know in today's scenario. So the approach in permaculture is from the from the attitude of treating problem itself as a solution and working over cooperation over competition and understanding the patterns existing in nature. So it identifies a law of return that whatever, for example, whatever plants take from the soil must be returned or they return in order for future generations of those plants to live there. Same as for designers ourselves as earth stewards, we can take from the land, but we also must return in order for a planet to remain healthy in the long term. So the idea behind permaculture is very simple. Take care of the earth and the earth will take care of you. The permaculture plays itself on three main ethics. Those are earth care, people care, and fair share. And the word permaculture comes from a combination of two words, permanent culture, and it is also known as permanent agriculture. Permaculture is the use of systems thinking and design principles to provide the organizing framework for implementing vision of any project. In simplified terms, it's just a way of thinking and incorporating all the principles that nature guides us with, and how can we take the inspirations and try to implement in our vision of any project as architects. I mean, I'm sure for all of us, while we study in all the semesters of a BH, we are all constantly trying to find an identity of ourselves and the way we would like to approach towards designing of any project. So this presentation in a way would kind of orient you in terms of following the steps with a backup of design thinking, so that the system that is evolved or the design that is evolved is permanent in nature. So the term was actually
Apurva?
yes.
Yeah, sorry, Apurva. Are you moving the slides? Because we can just see your first slide.
Oh, is it? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Are you able to see which slide are you able to see right now?
We can just see the first slide, which is not
Okay.
maximized also.
Give me a minute.
Can you put it on slideshow or something?
Okay. Yeah. You able to see now?
Yes, we can see the slide now.
Which one?
The introduction part, the third slide.
Okay. Now the ethics one.
No, it's again the third slide.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, now it's in the fourth slide.
Okay, got it. Is it saying ethics on the title?
Yes, Apurva.
Okay. Yeah, so actually I was explaining from this slide that the term is actually coined by by a team of Australian researchers, authors, scientists, teacher and a biologist called Bill Mollison and David Holmgren, which are the pioneers in permaculture, and they derived this term in 1970s. Since then, it has been a lot of gone through a lot of revisions and understanding, because nature is a constant teacher, and it has evolved through these three basic principles of earth care, fair share and people care. Is the slide for principles visible?
We can still see the fourth slide, there's ethics.
I think the internet is a little lagging.
Oh, it's loading as it. Apurva, you want me to share the slide?
Yeah, Shilpa, can you please do that?
Okay. Yeah. Apurva, can you see the slide?
Yeah, I can see it. Can you
Yeah, okay.
put it onto full screen?
Uh, this is a PDF. I couldn't download the PPT.
Okay. Okay, let's continue from here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, within these so we talked about ethics, the three ethics of permaculture, and then we have the principles that guide us through the evolution process of the design. The first principle here is on your right, uh, top corner, which is observed and interact. It says that beauty is in the eyes of the beholder, in a sense that everything in nature has a pattern, has a specific way of, uh, of existence, and at the same time, it says that only after observation will we be able to interact. So as much as information that we can collect in terms of studying the site or observing it, it makes us much more easier on the final design stages. Second is catch and store energy. Catch and store energy is basically using nature's free sources of sun, the wind, and catching it in terms of renewable energy sources. So, example, solar panels, wind breaks, there are multiple water harvesting systems. So you are actually storing the energy when you are getting it from, receiving it from nature, and then making it as part of the design. Then obtaining the yield. If in permaculture, it is specifically, it's a very specific design which says your input in a design or all your efforts in a design should be equal to the output, and that's when it comes to a balance. So we need to obtain an yield in a proportionate manner. Then applying self-regulation and accept feedback. This is a very intuitive approach in permaculture design, where it says that while you are observing and while you are interacting with nature or with designs, you actually can apply and learn from the initial steps and apply a self-regulation and give yourself a feedback. So this is where permaculture encourages the learning process even while designing. So use and value renewable resources and services. We all know about it. Then producing no waste. Waste is something that we treat as discarded, but it also says or changes the perspective of what exactly a waste is and how it can be reduced. The 4 R's: the reduce, reuse, recycle, and yeah. Based on that, from we go to the principle 7, which is design from patterns to details. It says that whole is a part of the system, and part is makes the whole design. So we are actually zooming in and zooming out to understand the scale of our design. At the same time, we can zoom into small details of the structural process. Principle number 8 is integrate rather than segregate. It says that if because it has a solution approach of considering problem itself as the key to our answer, integrating rather than segregating is encompasses to or encourages us to bring in factors and deal through design methods as architects and designers. Then use small and slow solutions. The foremost thing in permaculture is using or forging ahead with slow solutions which would give you a feedback, and then you can scale it to the requirement. But it says it advocates to start with slow and small solutions. Principle number 10 is use and value diversity. Um, it encourages to kind of uh, gather together all the kind of different diversity in terms of people knowledge, uh, your inspirations from nature, different stratas of considering not just us but the flora, the fauna, all the animals and birds, and how you can not just a building is a structure and four walls, but it's also the connection of a human uh, within the building and to its surrounding environments. Principle number 11 is use edges and value the marginal. It encourages that in every design there are some conflicts or some edges which are, which we usually kind of not take into consideration. And for example, permaculture basically is not just like design system, but it can also be used as a design system for creating social social groups and organizations and environment, because its foundation lies in giving back to nature and how it can also be done in communities. So when in communities you are working across the world, there are different conflicts or different issues, and how do you integrate and value even the marginal or the minority factors. Then the last and the principle number 12 is my favorite, in terms that it says creatively use and respond to change. It always encourages you to realign yourself and orient towards the change that has happened through the process and make it work in the design through your imagination, through your and each of these answers can be got back from the nature itself. So all these principles can be applied at any stage of a design, and they can also overlap. For example, if you are observing and interacting, you can also check with the principle 7 that you can also design from patterns to details, and then see how it is working in slow and small solutions, and then can have a self-regulation and feedback about your own application of the design process. Moving on to the next slide. Yeah, the concept lies in, as I mentioned, the efficiency ratio. If the inputs for any design are going in, what are the yields that we are getting? And at the same time, how is it affecting the land and environment? Also, how are we considering the culture of the space within the design? Because it's all, design is a tangible and an intangible, a combination of both. So how do we make the design the most unique in its, because every place and every region on this earth has a unique quality and has a unique characteristic about it. And if we are able to understand where are our inputs in terms of all the resources, materials, all earthworks, or all the climate related issues as well, and the skills and experiences of people who are working on the design, plus what are the yields we are getting in terms of a better user experience, a good environment to create, or are we able to harvest water, or are we able to regenerate soil, and how does it all affect? So being a permaculture designer, you think about the broader level perspective of where your design is located as well, and then connect to the cultural context of it. Next slide, please. The strategies in permaculture are very simple and easy to apply. The first is site observation and analysis. You observe the site thoroughly and analyze all the existing conditions, all the context, and then try to derive as much through your observations to interact with it. A relative placement is about placing these elements in connection to each other so that the energy exchange of humans or elements and the functions within the design are interconnected to each other. Then multiple elements for each function. A single element can serve the purpose of performing many functions in terms of if you are creating for example, these all strategies are related to how do you develop permaculture systems on a farm kind of a setup where if you're having a shelter, you can actually have solar panels on the top of it. You can actually grow creepers which will keep the inner part of the design cooler, and you can use the light and use the ventilation, and at the same time how can you integrate other forms of life as well. So in this small element there are multiple functions that are being served. Next slide. Yeah, multiple functions for each element. So the previous one that we saw was multiple elements for each function, and this one is about multiple functions for each element, which means every element can do multiple functions in terms of, for example, if we are growing trees and if we have the underground layer which we can grow our all our pollinators like the flowering species or the grains or something that can also be used back by the animal resource that we can have on our farm. Then using biological resources is using or being conscious about what resources are we bringing onto the land and how much will it be able to go back to the land. I mean, we all arise from the land and we all have to go back to the soil. So these biological resources are important to assure a permanence or regeneration of the soil. And I'll be coming back to why do we need to do all of the harvesting of water or talking about regeneration of soil or plantation of different kind of species or so in the next strategy it is about recycling energy and nutrients. So it talks about that how on a land where the building is supposed to be designed, how on a land can we recycle all the energies and nutrients through simple design interventions that in this picture you would see that there is a curve on the lower side which is collecting all the water and infiltrating it into the soil so the groundwater recharges. And here on the upper portion of the little hillside, all the trees are growing which are keeping the soil intact through their roots. Next slide. It also suggests about mimicking natural succession. In nature, everything has a timeline of growth, and at the same time, if we are able to observe the nature and interact with it, we can actually help the nature, slowly move towards its succession on its own. Yeah, and for example, in this picture, we have at the backdrop, we have the completely barren hillside, but then if you want to regenerate this place, we would like to have species which will have tree species which are called pioneer species, which take over the process just like any forest kind of an ecosystem, and then we can add in the process of nature by multiplying our efforts into species which also support birds and animals, and then kind of try to derive our needs from the land systems. So maximizing diversity is permaculture always encourages that it's not just one kind of a system, but it also has to involve as much as diversity that it can in terms, because that gives a resilience to the system. By resilience, we mean it can withstand the uh, the complex and the unpredicted nature of of the climate change that we are experiencing these days. Um, the last one, stacking in space and time. The, the strategy mimicking natural succession and stacking in space and time go hand in hand, because even in this principle, we we kind of try to get the yield through the system by stacking multiple functions, uh, in not just in terms of space design, but also within time frame. So every for example, even when we design a building, it takes almost uh, from the initiation stage to actual the construction and execution and everything, it has a timeline of all up to 2-3 years, depending on the scale of the project. Similarly, for permaculture systems which are based on natural uh, equations, it stacks itself in times, because a simple tree takes almost about minimum 4 to 5 years to grow and 8 years almost to give a fruit. So it's we this means strategy is actually advocating us to understand the timeline and the speed in which nature works. So let's come to the context understanding of the design process, where uh, in a in a documentation part of trying to observe any site, there are two kinds of data. One is like a hard data, which is existing features, slope study, analysis. How is the hydrology part underneath the land surface? How is the rock formations under the land surface? How are the microclimates and vegetations? Whereas soft data are how does it apply in terms or look in terms of aesthetics, uh, approach, sensory experience, human activity, and neighborhood culture as well. Next slide, Shilpa. So in context, what we start with is documenting the site conditions, like the size and the area with dimensions, then figuring out if we need to leave some setbacks or easements according to the norms, and thereafter reading contours is basically reading the surface of the land, and by reading the surface of the land and knowing the grade of slope, if it exists, we can actually derive the flow of water onto the site, that when it would receive rainwater as an energy source from nature, how can we actually incorporate that factor into our designing? And for that same reason, we are supposed to know the contours of the land and read the surface. Yeah. Similarly, on a climate analysis basis, we should know where is our site getting the direction of wind from, how much, in what region are we located, the site context, that how much amount of rainfall it receives, so that we can actually also calculate the output in terms of the efforts that we are putting in trying to harvest water. Then sun path is a general direction in which the sun rises and sun sets, and how does it actually has an impact on the designing of the building along with the natural environment around it. So with knowing the contours, we can actually mark the drainage directions in which the water would generally flow from a higher point to a lower point on the site. And if there are any existing trees on the site, and at what species, because a lot of observation will give you, looking at the trees will give you an idea about if there's availability of water, groundwater, or there's degradation of the soil that has happened, uh, or the presence of the biodiversity in terms of birds or other species will give you an idea of where does this region belong to the climate category, in, for example, a hotter humid climate or an arid climate, or a temperate climate. And then so in the in the in the in the observation of trees itself, there's a lot of knowledge that we can derive. And yeah, lastly is the man-made features. That what are the features in terms of access ways, the basic uh, basic small interventions, like okay, there's a footpath, there's a walking way, there's a curb, and how does this affect the approach in our uh, building systems and design. The next comes is the circulation. Circulation is something like marking the movement of or the current use of the site. For many a times, being in a completely different cultural context, this space is being used as walkway for people who want to access the other part of the land, or there are specific already existing vehicular circulation patterns which we can make use of. Yeah. And within the site conditions, there are factors such as noise from the traffic, noise from industries around, or the pollution in terms of air, and how do even systems designed with trees in mind can help us filter through the noise, and also help us to filter the air that we're breathing in, because these all factors are very important in considering and amplifying the experience of a user when he or she is using the building. Human and cultural uh, is a very sensitive part of permaculture design, where it says that it has to, the building design or the environment has to be very much in sync with the context that it is laid in. So behavior pattern, like all of us kind of have an idea about how behavior psychology and is affected by the environment that we all live in. And the same thing, if a building is being placed on a land, how it is going to interact not only with the land, but at the same time also the people who are around. So having an idea about sensitivity towards human and cultural aspects as well. And the utilities are where our power connections are coming from, where our water connections are coming from, where our services are being laid, where our sewage is going. So basically, all of this documentation in terms of context will give a clear idea and will help us through the next steps. This this slide is all about maximizing and analyzing what would be the best places or arenas where we can view, where we can have views from the site. And as designers, when we put so much effort in designing a building or a farm or any kind of a system, how is it being viewed from a distance? And also within the site, how can we minimize a lot of effort by observing and interacting and then deriving our design interventions in such a way that it encourages the existing features of the site. So all of these factors are basically trying to read how is the site and understanding the land. In uh, in our process as designers, what I felt amiss was we take in the charge of designing it for the users, designing it for the experience and the functions that the building design is supposed to do. But at the same time, in terms of land needs, these are the factors which already tell the current situation of the land. And what the difference is that we need to identify the land needs and also satisfy them in terms of regenerating it. So any building design is actually a man-made construction, and with these factors in mind and a little sensitivity, we can actually place these elements efficiently and make use of it for both the land and the needs of human as well. So overlapping all the information that we have just spoken about context documentation, and on the left side you would see and these six maps, which are an overlay of all the information that we have collected. And this method is called a sector map. While doing all this context and when we overlay all the information on top of each other, what we get is a complete analysis with the strengths, the weaknesses, opportunities, and challenges that we will have while working on the site. And as it was mentioned, how to integrate them in the design and try to solve it as designers. Yeah. So in the sector analysis, it is a study of natural factors that affect the land and helps to channelize the energies to our benefits. So sun and its orientation is the foremost, wind and its direction, contours and slopes. But in some situations, if your site is located in a village-like context, there are practices where people also have a habit of cleaning their land with fire and other cleaning the land of other factors, and that might also run your land into risk of fire. So how do you actually take all of these invisible risks also in factor and determine them as your challenges or opportunities, and determining how you want to incorporate it in your design. Then the soil type and condition. On a land, when we actually observe, there are different types of, sometimes there's almost a similar kind of a soil type, and sometimes there are different types of soils, and the condition of the soil is sometimes favorable according for the construction, like it has rock underneath and it is favorable for construction. But if the land is pretty much on a higher slope gradient, then the construction is not feasible. So this kind of an overlay will also help us to know where should we place our structural buildings in the design. And definitely the last one is the view. How do we optimize the most or harness the potential of the site conditions that we have in terms of aesthetics. Next slide. So in context and project definition, until now what we did was we documented the site in different forms and we overlapped them, and then we did the complete analysis in terms of the strengths and weaknesses, and that's one layer of drawing that we would have. This part is actually trying to define what kind of elements that we would like to develop as part of the design systems, in terms that there are site components which would be building entry, parking, service yard, a toddler play area, or spaces like for example, it's like deriving the or defining the project requirements in terms of what would be the need of the user, and how do we fulfill this need by coming to derivation of these components. And once these spaces are defined, we are able to find connection within them by actually calculating the area required for each of these components and then trying to place on the land design to the scale. So this, all the design thinking part and everything, this is a stage where we define the project in terms of the elements and then try to place them on the site according to the scale. So this keeps our design process very practical in terms of all the thought process that has gone behind. And yeah, it kind of encompasses all the connections that each of these components will have within themselves. Yeah. So the method of putting these components along with the area requirements is called zone planning with relative placement. It is a technique that positions the site components in our design in areas according to their need of use. In permaculture, as you can see, there's this zone 0, which is like very close to the house. So that's where a shelter for a person or a design like a main structure can come up. And that is also depending on all the factors that we studied, like the soil conditions, like the views, everything. So this zone planning with relative placement is another addition layer to the sector analysis that we did. So in this, we have zone 0, which is your main shelter. Then zone 1 is you're growing all the sustenance needs of an individual in terms of vegetables, herbs, or other kind of ornamental species and flowers. The zone 2 is about having more evolved systems in terms of managing your grey water, managing all the wastewater that is coming into your site, and how do you integrate into your system so that the nature itself is filtering through all the, so basically all your water from this shelter as grey or kitchen water or your basic washroom water can be filtered, and then the same can be used to through a system of applying filtration systems of sand, stones, and charcoal, and then flowing it to the same system as watering the plantation that we would have around your plant. Yeah. And then zone 3 is about growing your own crops, growing your own grains, vegetable grains, pulses, or cereals. Yeah. Zone 4 is about putting all your fruit trees in place, and zone 5 is letting the nature go wild for the supporting species to thrive. So this example is actually a self-sustenance model that encourages you to which also encourages you to live an off-grid sustainable life in terms of being efficient and observant about the natural systems and then designing it. So just a recap of the design stages that we spoke about. First comes with all the layers of reading the land and base map with the contour. Then the second layer is about the sector analysis, where we analyze the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and challenges. And then depending on these, as we have derived our site components with area requirements, we try to place them on the zone planning map so that it comes to a proper scale, and then we can try multiple options of deriving concepts from the similar elements through different relative placements. And it will be this gives you a complete free hand in terms of placing the elements, because now you have understood the connections within them. And the design plan is deriving to this complete master plan of how is the now then it each of the building design will be trying to connect the exterior of the environment. So there's an interior environment and then there's an exterior environment, and how do you merge the two of them, or how do you bring the exterior landscape inside the building in terms of having spaces where you can view the landscape, or having such facades like using glass facades, or on the region where it does not receive a lot of sunlight so that the heat does not get trapped. At the same time, if we are able, now the view part that we mentioned in the sector analysis comes into play, and then you can actually design in the master plan how the interior of a building is connecting to the exterior of the environment. So the design considerations of any permaculture design, apart from the process and all the thinking that goes into, I think these are the major three considerations that you should definitely try to bring in as a very valuable element to your and enhance the design. The first is water harvesting, soil regeneration, and biodiverse plantation. The reason for this is, as we all know, the construction that are happening in and the way we are sprawling, on the exterior, the cities are sprawling. There is we might lead to a situation where there is depleting. There is already the groundwater recharge is being depleting, and these kind of water harvesting systems can be done through your building design in terms of roof water harvesting, or in terms of harvesting the water that is falling on the land, or trying to reuse the waste water that we can before flushing out of the design system. And soil regeneration is on the land itself where the building or the structure is going to come. If we are able to regenerate the surrounding, because the construction activity itself will have a lot of disturbance in real life situations where execution of projects happen. There's a lot of construction waste debris or lying on the side, and this also deteriorates the soil microbiology. I mean, soil is actually the skin of the earth's surface, and as we all look after our skin, and can determine the health of it, the same way, if we understand the soil and treat it as like a outer skin surface of the earth's body, then there it needs moisture. And all the moisture goes away with the direct heat of the sun, and the wind wind, because of its movement, dehydrates the soil. And all of this, because of keeping the soil bare, it would not have all the living organisms that it supports. And these living organisms are basically all the decomposers that come in the third part of the food chain cycle. The first is the producer, then the consumers, and the decomposers. So if we do not have these organisms, the cycle of nature of decomposing biological resources is also an important factor to consider. And hence I think soil regeneration should be an important consideration, or must be an important consideration while design thinking. Then biodiverse plantation is about planting different kind of trees that serve different purposes. Mm, every tree, owing to the form or the texture or the canopy size or the strength of its bark, serves some kind of a function in terms in nature. And if we are able to observe and then try to replicate it, uh, then we would have as much diversity, not only in terms of food items or yield for us to relish, but at the same time giving back uh, giving back the according to the law of return, which says that as much as we take, we should be able or try to give it back what we taken from nature. Yeah. Next slide. So these design considerations are like rainwater harvesting, where you can harvest it from the rooftop or you can actually harvest it on the land. Trees are an excellent way of harvesting the water and absorbing it in their roots, and then that's how they keep it in store, and then they use it uh, also while recharging the groundwater. Next slide. So plantation with native tree species is each a region has a specific pattern of trees that grows, and with these native species, which are some taller species, which are some hardy species, like for example, uh, trees like species like cactus, which are succulent, or aloe veras, are a very good example, which would not let the fire break in any kind of a design system. So these are actually all site planning considerations that we are trying to build as the land as much resilient as we can. And there are few species which are like thorny species, or which act as life fence species, which would not let any kind of a human disturbance or animal disturbance, because there are few sites that have worked which are on the edge of a forest where you have different kind of wildlife interaction. And how do you also at the same time give them a space but keep them at a bay while integrating them into the design thinking as well.
Apurva, your voice is breaking. Yeah,
Hello?
Apurva, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, now it's clear. Yeah.
Yeah. As we right now just spoke about soil regenerations, understanding about the soil is that it has different layers and stratas, and the most topmost soil is almost takes hundred of years to build just an inch thick. So this is actually a very valuable resource in terms of you know existence of all the living organisms and for our survival as well. So regenerating the soil, there are different techniques. while it while through water harvesting, the moisture is retained. Through plantation, the roots keep the soil intact, and this the soil texture improves, which increases the water holding capacity. And yeah, it's like slowly building the soil through the years, as you are also uh, considering to design and live in the space. Microclimate study is also again very contextual in terms that first one is aspect that if your land is situated on a higher slope or on a hillock, there would be different side of the hill which would face towards the direction of the sun, and that would determine how much of light is coming onto your site, and what kind of design intervention do you need to do in getting all the in maximizing the use of energy sources that we get from nature. Solar orientation is again trying to face the building according to the wind and sun energies that we are receiving, and also depends on what location in terms of latitude and longitude are we located, so that we can uh, know the height of the sun at what angle it is, so that we can actually also determine to design our openings of the building structure and let the air come in, or the light to enter according to such small. So basically this is now then designing to small details of your building system and trying to get the energy factors in place. And for example, uh, in the picture on the left bottom corner, there's this is something called effect of the wind, that the effect of the wind increases when it goes from a higher slope to a lower slope, and this actually uh, informs to make structural considerations for any kind of a building that you would like to place, or the function of it, and majorly the load bearing resolution that you would need to decide based on the energy that you're getting. So all these factors are actually the wind, the sun, the orientation, and the water. These are always there, alive, and working their role in on the land. And instead of trying to fight against these forces, if you are able to integrate them through a proper design thinking in the process, it becomes a way much more easier and a functional design system, and hence it would lead towards permanence. Next slide. So all its inspirations are derived from nature's pattern, that if just like a tree, it has branches, it has stems, it has leaves, and even within the leaves, there are patterns, veins, and all of this actually inspires us to understand the distribution system that occurs in natural forms. Or, for example, streams in a watershed, the curves and elevations of a mountain actually determine the course of the river, and this understanding can help us to determine distribution factors or trying to manage the water system on our land. Just like any human body, we have circulation systems. The design in itself has different, for example, let's say an institute, or any kind of a hospital or a hospitality like project. It would have different body of functions, each satisfied by each building structure. And if you are able to connect these connections or circulations, just like it exists in all forms of human body, then it becomes an easier understanding of bringing in or taking in inspirations from nature and then applying it to the design. Then another interesting patterns are waves and meanders. Meandering river is actually creates a lot of, so this all the curves of this meandering wave is creating a lot of edges, and this creates a lot of space for the nature to thrive, because as we say, use and value marginal resources, is these small edges and places are the most alive with, life forms in terms. Uh, this factor can also exist on a land, and it gives you a lot of information about the microclimate. Each of these spaces, a particular tree, once you go under a shade of a tree, it's a complete different microclimate, and you might hear a song of a bird, or you might hear an insect going around, or you can just see a few creatures that are, feeding on their food. So basically, these kind of systems are very alive in their form, and these spaces can also be created while designing our pathways, our circulation spaces, interconnectivity from one building space to another spaces, or uh, yeah, within the site, and also on a broad scale outside this site as well, in terms of approach, or in terms of to increase the aesthetic sense of the design. Yeah. Then mushroom growth is something. uh, these are all factors, like just like a mushroom that it's a fungi, and when it comes out of the soil, it 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 has a particular function to it, and the shape helps it to absorb the moisture, and at the same time, it's it stores energy in forms of the wave structure. Then ocean waves are also, these are all basically examples of the way waves and meanders occur in nature's pattern, and how do we actually apply it into a system. That, for example, a pond is there, we can create multiple edges for that pond and different spaces, so this also increases the interaction of the user with the water, and also let them experience the sense, have them a sensory experience as well, of being able to connect or to experience water spaces designed in these forms. Next slide. These are grids, networks, and tessellations. We have all seen these spider web, the way a honeycomb or sunflower seeds, and the way. So these kind of networks that occur in nature are used in plantation design or spacing in permaculture systems, where uh, a grid or a network will help to stop the motion of strong forces of water, if that's the situation on a site, and how we can deal that energy efficient methods, and how we can take inspiration from these patterns that exist in nature and apply it onto our plantation design systems as well. Next slide, Shilpa. Yeah. Spirals, you can see them in whirlwinds, or spaces where the small plant tendril of a plant climbs onto the support structure, and all the weather systems as well. So by putting or providing irrigation to your landscape systems, you can also take inspiration from these patterns and design it in a way that becomes a lot more efficient in terms of it trying to serve its function. Yeah. Similarly, there's this outdoor shower space, which is designed in a way that a user can use this space, but at the same time has all the privacy with the required resources for this space to function. And as I mentioned in the patterns of the leaves, the way the veins distribute the water from the roots to the stem to the branches and then finally the leaves. it's an amazing example of how resources can be distributed and the circulation can be established within design spaces. So the basic headline for all of the design systems is the first picture is of a street that needs a pump to take up stormwater, an air conditioner to improve the climate, a device to capture carbon dioxide and with all the carbon footprint that we all are producing, and then a dust catcher and something to filter the air, then shade from the high intensity radiation of the sun. Wildlife, we all need some form of touch with the nature in different forms, the animals and birds, and we need wildlife habitat, something that looks good and is also low maintenance to have all these factors being served by one single element is a tree. That this simple placement and consideration of landscape while site planning stage itself helped to integrate the environment into the building, because a building is not an individual structure but it's part of the environment that it is being created, and vice versa. So being mindful is the most important criteria while deciding any factors for site planning. And if the uh, when we are very thorough with the site planning stage, the buildings and all the patterns that we have used for enhancing the circulation, the within the buildings, the spaces, and while we all did the zone planning of the site components, or the sector map, where we have taken in consideration all the weaknesses, all the strengths, and the factors that provide opportunity and challenges for us to work on. This becomes a complete exercise of integrating landscape in the very initial part in the process of site planning. So here's a little bit about my journey. After doing my bachelor's, while I was in my thesis here, I kind of realized that my thesis project was a corporate office building for a biotech company, and while I realized and I did a lot of research about how to increase the human experience in a building, and I realized that there is not much connection of the inside to the outside of the building. And I thought, if there's not much connection of a building to the environment, can I bring the environment inside? So that was the first thought which I had, and then I read a lot about interior landscape and how to incorporate and what is the role of interior landscape in designing of buildings, and how can it increase the human experience within the building. And then after the graduation, I did this competition with Singapore Green Building Council, which had a manifesto that with the changing times, how can we, what would be the possible concept of deriving all our needs, but at the same time, not putting much pressure on the nature's resources. So this concept called degrowth is about reducing consumerism to actually and distributing the functions by stacking multiple one element serving many functions. So so the need of the resources required comes down to a very minimal possibility. And thereafter, with this idea, I did work as a landscape designer in a well-established firm, practicing for past 30 years. and that's where I understood all the processes of a design from the initial idea to the end point where we incorporate all the factors and see if the designing is actually a practical solution to the problem that it all was defined with. So, and then the experience of permaculture. Permaculture, I lived on a farm for almost almost 3 years, where I was designing, where I was working with farmers, where I was working with local village women and trying to understand how do these systems work in a very rural kind of a system. So when I was working in a landscape firm, I was doing all the commercial landscape designs and beautiful hotels and patios and trellises. But with I my urge was to learn traditional ways of designing landscapes, and with this approach, I had to relearn the whole design process from deriving all the skills from architecture and bringing in the design thinking part from permaculture. And yeah, I think that's where the journey led to being mindful. So, as all of us as architects, I think the journey, the reason that we chose being architects is, the journey being a path of learning, playing, working, and also uh, an inner journey of being present on or being born on this planet and trying to also give it back to what we are trying to take. And this is all what we are being trained for, the part of thinking it like a design thinking and then putting all these practices into application. So my reflection as a designer, I understand that permaculture is a harmonious integration of land design and people, providing the food, energy, shelter, and other material and non-material needs in a sustainable way. So we need to have a respect towards the landforms. You have to provide shelter with natural materials, harvest water when it rains, use renewable and affordable energies, store free energy from the sun, recycle and reuse materials, and have clean and green transport while we are, trying to be part of this, be part of this planet. I think. Yeah. So here I finish with my presentation, Shilpa.
Yes, Apurva. So yeah, thank you so much for your insights and to introduce us to permaculture. So more importantly, stressing on the connection between human and nature here, and the importance to enhance our senses in architecture by using functions of each element of site, as you discussed, like biological elements, contours, topography, diversity, zone placements, and the entire design stage phases and your considerations and the context of site. So I think I'm very sure at least the students who are here would have benefited a lot from the presentation and would have understood the importance of site planning and context in the design stage. Thank you so much. So do anyone have any questions to ask her regarding the presentation? No, I think they are all quite clear. Okay. Yeah, thank you so much, Apurva. That was very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Shilpa. Thank you everyone for listening and taking in what you can. I would I would like if you could just write down the 3 steps that I mentioned in the first slide. That what did you already know, what did you already learn, what did you learn, and how you can actually apply these principles while designing your systems. So yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Apurva. Yes, I think they'll sure do. At least those who are here. Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys, those who are here. Thank you so much for attending the lecture. Have a nice day.